Alright, hello again. It's GJ Wood, Gareth Wood. Today I'm going to read a story called Welcome to Facetown Mitchell, which is available in Screaming Blue City Murder short stories via KGHH. I hope you like this. So here we go. Mitchell didn't want to go to Facetown. It gave him the shivers like maggots in his shirt. Facetown, it just gives me the shits, just the sheer idea of it. Needs must though, Mitchell, he told himself, supping ale shots on block 6000 Colmore Row. Nobody wants to go to Facetown, you dull bastard, Clint Skillard told him in the wire mounds of their office earlier in the week. But if you want to fix up your replica, and Mitchell spoke dreamily of the government stores. You got cash, Mitchell? The fuck you have. None of us have in the lower middles. Shit, most of the straight middles and uppers would struggle to get a pound of face on government rates. And that busty clone you have needs at least £2 of meat to make up the grill, right? But Facetown, Clint. Get some balls, Mitchell. Christ, I'll come with you if you like. You could use a double stair valve for Michelle. She's starting to go cockeyed and gives me a right sog on when she droops whilst I'm in her. They're not just there to bounce on, Clint. You know what you're dealing with, the science in them. Mitchell, come on. Are we going to get this trip going or not? Mitchell nodded, a fear crumbling his stomach, but the lure of cheap face was too much. She wasn't finished. The perfect wrought imperfections it couldn't do, even if he had to go to Facetown. And it was never easy to sleep in the Blue City, and Mitchell had a small joining room pad on the 200th floor of Weathers Borough. The building climbed up to where hover cranes built more floors in an endless cycle of metal bones and crunching hammers. His insulation was the same as the other apartments, and the tenants prayed for more floors just so the engines of the cranes would be further away, that they'd clamber into space itself and drift away, monstrous steel arms suddenly lost and weightless. Mitchell's two rooms were regulation size. At 5'9" his thick hair would brush the ceiling as he entered or stood to make dinner in the built-in. If he lay down, his feet would touch the side of his main living hub whilst his hands would touch the other. The second room, smaller by a third, housed the bed platform, toilet and wet wall, a sprinkling shower you pressed against, small pimples of water flirting with the body in a brief wash of morning. They were going to go to Facetown tomorrow. We are, Suzanne, I promise. His replica looked up from the full side of its face, the pristine hair hanging soothingly over the mauled left cheek where the yellow scabs of faded fake bone stood jagged and meat-free. It, Suzanne, was unable to drawl at the moment, though. Were the face completed and the flesh spooled onto supporting nerve joists, her expression would surely have been accompanied by shimmering snail lines of spittle. Mitchell had allowed Susan to charge down. There was no point in keeping her levels up before he picked up some face. Better to wire her to the grid when she was complete. They sat together as the distant hover cranes worked endlessly, their mechanical girder song almost tragic in its way, a metal mewling from the soul to the sky. Mitchell gazed longingly at his Suzanne as the lights of passing air trolleys drew blue webs upon her. What science, he thought. She just looks exactly like, apart from... Susan's unfinished face lolled into hue of buzzing twilight. The mangled meat-racked mince of her unfinished side was like steak half chewed. Thick slices of chuck tossed to the bear pigs at the zoo block. Mitchell had arranged to meet Skillard at 101 Bean, the main chain store coffee shop in the lower middles. The nearest store was on 1000 Church Hall and Melrose, the shuffle quarters, as it had been christened some years back on account of the amount of consumers saturating the concrete 24 hours a day, every day. All of the shopping blocks that way were denied holiday passes. Local laws determined that they must remain open at all times. Skillard had a particular love for this branch of 101, ever since the anti-consumer law protest 8 years previous, which saw a female demonstrator run to the counter, explosive taped, and detonate herself amidst the fevered latte hands. The staff continued to serve even as parts of the woman's torso lay on the counter like a seeping tip jar, the pennies replaced by the tumbling tubes of gut. Skillard had sat there drinking as it happened, the remaining minutes of his visit spent in utter hysterics. It was hilarious, Mitchell. Come on, drop a smile on me. Do you remember them, the fuckers queuing for their coffees? They'd waited so long that not even the tip rack of some yammering blow-up could deter them. Priceless. Skillard's laughter almost shook him from their cabinet booth. Calm down, Clint. Jesus Christ, you've been laughing at that for years. Good ones never tire, my man. What's with you anyway? Shitting bricks over Facetown. Skillard's mockery sent anger through Mitchell in small harpoons. Just give it a fucking rest, Clint. We're going, aren't we? Aren't we? His friend spat at the phone from his plastic. Don't get pissy with me, pal. Shit, if it wasn't for my nagging, you wouldn't even be getting some chunks for your replica. You'd be fucking Harvey Dent forever. Mitchell simpered acquiescence and finished his triple shot in virtual silence. Skillard's bomb corpse reminiscences were enough mouth noise for the two of them. They needed to ride to the Neon City Metro through the end of Digbeth Town tracks. It would be dark when they arrived. Facetown didn't open until dusk. Before the dark descended, the shuttered grills of the hopeless towers and the gore-stained paving of the roads were almost empty. Only last night's sullied mutilations lingered in the day, the final strands of life ebbing away from them in wet flatulence and bladder failure. The Neon City Metro ran on spirals. It wound down past the blocks and transportation chambers like a rust-riddled serpent through a jungle of electric sensors and scaffolding. Each coach held 200 passengers. They sat pulsating in the squash, squirming for a slither of cold air as the grease hearts pumped irregular rhythms. The air on the metro was terrible. All of the jumbled lung spill merged into bitter fog. The stink of being there turned Mitchell's stomach. He'd always dreaded the neon line. Even without Facetown to contend with, he usually drove, took his place amongst the wheel boxes of transportation chambers, sat there in musically muted fatigue as the four-storey gears groaned and lifted the cargo to their desired roads. He could take that. The impossible enclosure of a car, he could handle it. The radio rendered reality of rush hour with all the other sectors, car faces, but the metro? On the neon line, it was nearly a bridge too far for his guts. If we don't get off here soon, Clint, I'm going to plaster the bastard windows. Shitting bricks over Facetown, are we, my man? No, it's this bloody metro, this stink. Why make a spiral line and pack out the carriages, eh? Why would you do it? Easy, boy. Skillard shushed the rising panic. We've got a way to go yet, but the train will start to thin out soon. And it did. There wasn't much call for people to ride the spiral too far down. The litter level residents didn't travel much. For them, down amidst the detritus, the rubble, the horror, there was little scope for travel outside. There was little scope for anything. The passengers gradually faded, scuttling into their electro-lit avenues like grumbling lice, their voices a cacophony of displeasure. The metro carriages were by no means empty, though. With a station every 500 metres, the snake in Behemoth broke nearly as soon as it accelerated. Why do they have so many bloody stops? Mitchell barked irritably. His previously mildly perceptible agitation was now beginning to spout from his person like flaming hairs. You know why, Skillard answered, nodding his head towards a row of hideously obese passengers, their drooping forms pressed into several of the many XXXXXL seats. Those tubs can't waddle any further without keeling over, and the cleaners can't lift that kind of weight. Makes me sick. They'd be better off replacing themselves, thinner, and ditching the real bodies, just getting clones, cloning themselves, ditching them, the real them. Easy, Mitchell, calm down. It's the future, Skillard giggled, his colleagues' disdain like a feather on his toes. Night was coming through the scaffolding of unfinished skyscrapers like filthy water through the boards of a sinking boat. The blackness grew a silver skin as the billion new lights of evening exploded with electrode ejaculate. How much longer till we get off? Mitchell had been watching the slowly diminishing passenger quota and was becoming more uneasy with every ghostly substitution. We're nearly there, mate. Couple more stops. The litter levels were grotesque. Mitchell, like most of those able to stay away, avoided the rank plateaus as though stepping over dog turds. Sure, for adolescent kicks, when he was studying at the Blue Cities Virtual University, he and some of the other first years had taken a trip to some of the higher metals as some kind of initiation in the city. There were a few bars located near the entrance that offered brief flirtation with the putrid death rattle of the rotten avenues below. These pubs teased with their transient awfulness. Patrons of the first forays into the hell filth popped in and ran fear through the relatively affluent students as they table sat and giggled under fright, their growing intoxication acting as steroidal bravery and ensuring that at least one of them would spark conversation with one of the lowers. Stories abounded when Mitchell started university about those who'd wandered down there and never returned, their organs framed for sale after being farmed, sex ploys luring them further on. The most horrible of all, their faces were torn clean off, pressed through the mincers and resold in featureless vacuum packs for the likes of adult Mitchell and Skillard. Face meat tourists shopping cheap features for their replicas. Christ, this is grim. Mitchell regarded the view from the gradually slowing windows. The spiralling metro was reaching its furthest point. It didn't go all the way to -9, Facetown. There's no way they'd get drivers to head that far into the pulsing bowels. There's no way. Even with the Meccano cell drive-in booze, the few drivers that did the run would only go to -7, 2, maybe 3 times a month. The Metro group found that any more trips than this caused a sickening bout of the shivering horrors and various degrees of accompanying depressions. When they first employed drivers to head that way on a regular shift pattern, the suicide rate soared to impossible heights. At least a dozen drivers had ended it by speeding up at the last stop, crashing themselves and the remaining transient sleepers into the buffer walls and dying in a scuttling boom of flames, their empty hearts awhirl amidst the simmering flesh of their hopeless seated bodies. Destruction. They wanted it. They prayed for it at the steering block, such was their dismay at being down there amongst the rat-tailed sunless dirge of the litter levels. The Metro stopped at the edge of Lower Digbeth. "This it?" Mitchell asked, uneasily, his slowly turning head surveying the most empty seat lines around him. "Sure is," Skillard replied, his thin hands lifting his leather satchel and clasping it near to his chest, his legs edging the rest of him past the carcass of a sleeping drunk gone solid on meths. They scuttled through the gaping metal and down the motion steps onto the closest approximation of a street that the lower litters had to offer. Before their heels could cool on the ruptured concrete, the Metro had begun to reverse. They both turned and watched the severed cabin lights vanish into the beam-battered blackness behind them. Ahead, cast in a mix of stuttering neon and naked flames, was a series of obvious conurbations, a series of electric hamlets covered in jawlines of jagged shadow. Ahead was, for Mitchell, the unknown. Ahead was Facetown. The perforated shell of the old Bullring Mall stood unevenly beside their tiny skulking forms. Looming like a fallen spaceship, the grotesque mottle of the Selfridges building, still there in plastic disease, its dreadfully acned skin broken, cracked and seeping innards of asbestos insulation and shattered products. Its gluttony now spiked and hole-crippled, seemed hideously incongruous amongst the slithering human shapes hanging from the atmosphere. Skillard stood whistling slow, incorrect notes, his small leather bag swung like a burnished trapeze as he shuffled his feet. Mitchell was already picturing the first attack, possibly the last. He imagined a sudden horde, a beast tsunami. He could picture ugly, jagged figures growing from the shadows like teeth, then suddenly separated jaws of a shark. Can't be a good idea just standing still, Clint. I mean, which fucking way is it? I think it's that-a-way. Skillard twirled in the swarf dust and bowed his head towards some gnarled awnings and long rusted beams plucked violently from the overhanging roads. Are you sure? Skillard shrugged. It's all the same in the end, my man. Fuck his cryptic japes, Mitchell thought, seething. I just want my slice of face. They raised hoods and walked through the gaunt, tapered roads of the lowers. Above them, rattling like truncheons along cell bars, the transportation chambers sent their dull moans through the metal and scrap. After a short while, they began to see people. Like all districts of financial and social ruin, Old Digbeth's residents littered the walls, pressed tightly, smoke rising from their second-hand tobacco, their wheezing lungs spitting murmurs between the grey. Occasional neon entries shone like burning scars. Green seeped into reds, the neon primaries. Mitchell felt pure discomfort. Skillard strolled with vague familiarity, his black bag clutched at the swing. His face was covered with a hood, expression hard to discern, though Mitchell imagined that his look was intent, focused, those angular features directed towards the target of their visit. No diversions, no interest in anything else. For Mitchell, this far from the comfort of Susan's half-smile and his tight belongings, it was all cold and savagery. It dawned on Mitchell that they were now attracting some interest from the passers-by. Occasional groups of slim watchers turned their heads as the two acquaintances passed them. Even with their clothes muted and as rough as they could get them, it was obvious that they were tourists, not citizens. I'm starting to think we might get jumped here, Clint. Nothing to worry about, my man. Skillard's stride was consistent. He carried no apparent concern. We're just getting to the right place now. Facetown? Yeah, Mitchell. Facetown. They came to a crossing. Two pubs rested in rumbling moodiness. A few faces crawled from the doorways, music seeped in sodden slurs from behind them. Mitchell's funnelled eeriness was escaping from his collar like white lice. We're not going in there, are we? Clint, we're not going in there. Is that Facetown? Shut it, Mitchell, I'll be back in a moment, wait here. Skillard skipped towards the pub with a faded grey wolf on the sign above the entrance. Mitchell stepped backwards, trying to look innocuous, his back pressed against the wall which, within a few seconds, exposed a sticky wetness, the source of which was indeterminable. Mitchell lurched forward and felt his back. The smell on his fingers was something in between litter and meat. Mitchell watched as Skillard mimed with the two other men at the doorway. Their conversation was general. The hands of the two strangers waved gently in apparent directions. What the fuck is he doing? Mitchell's confusion frustrated him. He felt that this event, this deal, was somehow occurring without him, alongside him. It was as though he was watching this on a home television, a TV show, Something like that, it seemed. I mean, does Clint even know this man? He wondered. Where is Facetown? Mitchell was trying not to look around too much. The visit was a hooker fuck. He wanted in, business ejaculated as fast as possible, and then, sated and guilt-covered, he wanted out, quickly. Though try as he might, his gaze climbed and crawled, slipped and spied. He found that he was soaking it all up, the rot, the brick shards, the glassless window frames with crying baby songs, even the mutilated canine still limping at the stroll, their limbs occasional and cripple cut. Where was the violence? He saw nothing but poverty. At the corners between the narrowing landscape and alley scrawl, there were tents, canvas hangers slung over rope like the shed skin of giants. He could see by the light of dancing drum fires that small faces peeked from the gaps. They were the smile-gone skulls of the wretched, young and old, broke at all ages. Mitchell felt grotesque, a piranha at the wet end of an already severed limb. Wake the fuck up, my man! Mitchell leaped, shaken from his reverie. Finished with your pals now, have you? These pals of ours just hooked us up with what we're here for. Skillard was alive with nervous laughter. What did it cost? When do we pick it up? Pick it up? Skillard laughed loud and shrill. Mitchell sank back in fear. They'd be set upon. He shouldn't have been concerned. Apart from glances, there was no intrusion in their activities. Yeah, we have to pick it up ourselves. This way, my man. They made for the nearby alleys. Mitchell's mind was a whirl. He pictured Facetown like some low-end pawn shop or a meet with swollen muscle where they'd surely lose their watches, their metro passes and their shoes before they'd be allowed to leave. But this, skipping through alleys of the canvas hidden, he'd seen no threat, no hint of violent intent, just these scattered tents, these busted wall tenements and peeking faces, the eyes darting feverishly amidst the black and orange. Somewhere around here, Skillard was speaking aloud, distractedly, as though attempting to solve a conundrum alone. Ah, is this Swallow Block? He strained to read a street sign daubed in thick glue near to 2 fingers of broken drain pipes. Mitchell strained upwards. It looks like it. Excellent, exclaimed Skillard, finger in the clasp of his leather bag. The tents became more putrid as the 2 men passed further into the blackness. Mitchell winced from the stink. He could feel the rodent tails tickle the uppers of his shoes. The soles were doused in trodden shit. Skillard stepped along, hunched, his face pressed close to the openings of the tents. What are you doing? Are we meeting the cellar here? Mitchell was fast feeling the growing discomfort again. This new search was rank and blue bottle sick. The cellar? Skillard giggled again. Yeah, we're meeting the cellar here, Mitchell. Miranda? Skillard began to whisper loudly, his voice a tense tremolo. Miranda Lucas. Who's Miranda Lucas? Mitchell asked harshly. Just shut it, man. You're a fucking pain. Miranda Lucas. Miranda? I'm Miranda Lucas, a tiny voice whispered back from the canvas darkness. She was so very thin. Mitchell gritted his teeth as her face and neck grew from the gap of her tent like strange weed. Skillard crouched on some cardboard, a welcome mat of sorts. His jagged features suddenly became more fevered. His hands grew into tentacles that weaved a plea and expression heavy fluttering. We're here for some face, he said candidly. Face, she replied gently. Yes, my love, he slithered. We need a few ounces of good face to finish off our replicas up in the lower middles. Costs a wedge up there, though, eh? I wouldn't... She seemed glazed, half-starved. Clint, what are you up to? Skillard spun round. You wanted some fucking face, Mitchell. You want it down here, right? Well, where do you think we get it, huh? You have to harvest your own. Those mugs earlier on were just pointing us in the right direction for a good shade, good cheeks, yeah? Do you like Miranda's face? Mitchell suddenly felt like he had when wanking drunk as a youth. He felt that deep sadness, that seediness, the unabashed mass within. But now, unlike then, he was conflicted. His preconceptions wavered like a metal detector on a beach made of nails. Her face, the skin of her face, did seem effervescent. There was no doubt in that. There was almost something apart from the rest of her. It shined, not just from the grease, it shimmered, that was it. It shimmered amongst the webbed hideousness of the alleyway. But the wrinkles, I mean, the slight liver spotting and the aging hang of the cheek meat, would it be possible to manipulate it for Susan, even with a 2000 mincer? Well, Skillard tilted his head. Do you like the shades? Mitchell was lost somehow, further down now. This is what we're here for, he reasoned within. This is why we came to Facetown, but I thought we'd just buy a bag of... Look, my man, is it worth me continuing with this? Impatience reigned. She's a little old, Clint. Mitchell felt as though he was at the most peculiar market. The faces in the other tent, the audience, were mute. They stared outwards occasionally, but through the sallow failure of their eyes, it was impossible to detect what they actually focused on. The barter and deal, or the dead night that hung about them in the alleyway stink. The shade, Mitchell. I asked if you liked the shade. Well, yes, I mean, looking at it, yeah, I guess I do like the shade. I think it's fine. I think the shade's fine. Good, Skillard smiled through his lips. Then take a look at these. He pulled back the flap of the canvas, and there, squatting behind Miranda Lucas, their twin faces, plumper with the natural swell of childhood, were her young daughters. The parcel was so very warm. Mitchell's stomach churned as he held it closely. It felt like a delicatessen bag. Skillard was whistling that same slow tune again, washing his instruments in a puddle beneath the metro station neon. The heat from the grease paper surged into Mitchell's palms as he felt the cheek meat slide around through the blood. She just let you take it, Skillard. I mean, for what? For 200? For 200? Of course she did. Skillard shook the liquid from his scissors and tossed the anaesthetic vials into a gutter distance. That's enough money for her and the twins for months to come. They can get themselves out of the canvas and into one of the empty tenements. Move on up. Sure, she can take them somewhere dry and dark without any fucking mirrors. Now, Mitchell. Skillard stood and walked towards his friend. You wanted the face for your Susan, but you weren't going to do the cut. You got face too, Clent. Skillard was close enough to kiss Mitchell, but his face was twisted into an angry sword. Yeah, I got a couple of ounces on your pay. I got some face. Well fucking played, Mitchell. But what did you get, eh? You got full face for your Suzanne, your replica, a dead wife relayed with the cheeks of cherubs, and you didn't raise a fucking hand. Your dead wife, Mitchell. You'll mince the faces and you'll bring her back, and I did you a favour. I did you a favour, Mitchell. A huge one at that. I carved them up for you, sewed them up, cleaned the little fuckers and left them there out in the cold with their junky mother for you, Mitchell. Mitchell shook his head. Not in disagreement, but in realisation. He knew that Skillard had helped him. But to be here at all, to be part of this evening, it was monstrous, and he knew it. I know what you did, Clent. You did what I could never have done, but something I needed. Skillard turned away and lifted his bag, brushing the silt from the machine wind away. I'm grateful, Clent, I am. I just thought, Mitchell smiled grimly, I thought that FaceTime was going to be, well, I thought FaceTime was going to be like a shop or something. Skillard grinned back at him. FaceTime, man. FaceTime is Fucktown, it's Speed Town, it's Coke Town, Nonce Town, it's Murder Town and Rape Town, it's N Town, Bone Town, Limb Town and Queer Town. It's all of them. Whatever you want it to be. We're the middle of the road up there, but shit rolls downhill, and here, at the end of the line, we've enough to own them, to be their gods. An evening out to us is a lifetime to them, Mitchell. We can take what we want, and it's the way it has to be. The food chain, Mitchell. You have to follow the food chain. And they stood for a moment, eyes locked, the shrill early hours behind them in Facetown, the spiralling metro creaking its way towards them. They stood, and they knew that this was true, Skillard's assertion, Mitchell's understanding. The doors of the train retracted slowly and the men took their seats. Mitchell placed the parcel into his pocket. It protruded like a wet tongue. They were silent. They were both sleepy as the train ached upwards. Mitchell fingered the soft material as they rose. He pressed the flesh between his thumb and index finger, allowing himself a mere moment to remember the skull that once wore it. It would be the last time he ever pictured her so vividly. Soon it would be part of his new Suzanne, the end of her perfect smile, the smooth crescent of her face. Soon Mitchell would be able to hold his full wife again, at least the replica. Soon they'd be back in the middle of the Blue City, Facetown nothing but a discreet trip into the bowels of a coughing hell. Hope you enjoyed that. Like I say, available in Screaming Blue City Murder on Amazon and such places. So yeah, hope you enjoyed that. I'll be back in a week or so with another story. Thanks very much. Take care.